The rain in Seoul didn't wash things clean. It only turned the dust of history into a thick, suffocating mud. In the heart of the Gyeongbokgung secret garden, Ji-hoon stood on the stone bridge, his navy ceremonial robes heavy with the dampness of the evening. Across from him, Naomi stood like a vision carved from obsidian and silk. Her cream-colored hanbok was splashed with the pink of fallen blossoms, but her eyes held the cold fire of someone who had already seen the end of the world. "My father says you are a virus in our bloodline," Ji-hoon whispered, the sound of the rain nearly swallowing his words. "And mine says your family is a hollow shell held together by stolen ghosts," Naomi replied, stepping closer until the scent of her jasmine perfume warred with the metallic tang of the city. They were the heirs to two empires built on a mutual hatred so profound it had become their only common language. To love was to invite the executioner to dinner. And yet, as Ji-hoon reached out to touch the wet silk of her sleeve, he knew he wasn't just touching a girl. He was grabbing the hilt of a blade that would eventually gut his entire legacy. The secret garden was an ironic name. In the digital age, nothing was secret, especially not for the Choi family. High-definition cameras were tucked into the eaves of the traditional pagodas, their infrared eyes tracking the heat signatures of the two silhouettes on the bridge. Ji-hoon watched Naomi. He had been trained from birth to analyze assets, and Naomi was the most volatile asset he had ever encountered. Her father, a Nigerian shipping magnate who had carved a path through the xenophobic walls of the Korean elite, was currently dismantling Ji-hoon's father's monopoly on the Incheon ports. This meeting wasn't supposed to be a tryst. It was a surrender. "You have the ledger?" Naomi asked. Her voice was steady, but he saw the slight tremor in her hands. She wore her braids pulled back into a regal crown, adorned with jade pins that cost more than a common man's life. Ji-hoon reached into the heavy embroidered sleeve of his durumagi. He pulled out a matte black drive. "It's all here. Every offshore account, every shell company my father used to siphon the pension funds of your father's employees. This is the inheritance he promised me. I'm giving it to you instead." Naomi took the drive, her fingers brushing his. The warmth was jarring. It was a physical reminder that they were flesh and blood, not just pawns in a corporate war. "Why?" she asked. "You're throwing away a kingdom for a girl you've met 5 times in the dark." "I'm not giving it up for you," Ji-hoon lied, his face a mask of aristocratic indifference. "I'm giving it up because a throne built on these secrets is just a gilded coffin. I'd rather be a ghost than a king in a graveyard." The world's logic, however, did not reward his honesty. A soft hum vibrated in the air, a security drone hovering just above the weeping willow. Its red light blinked like a rhythmic heartbeat. "Go," Ji-hoon commanded. "If my father sees you with that drive, he won't just deport you. He'll make sure you disappear before you reach the airport." Naomi didn't say goodbye. She turned and vanished into the shadows of the bamboo, her silk skirts whispering against the stone. Ji-hoon stood alone on the bridge, feeling the first true pang of the poisoned crown. He had betrayed his blood. He had handed the sword to his enemy. And as he looked into the dark water of the koi pond, he saw his own reflection starting to blur. First stage of his erasure. The grand ballroom of the Choi estate was a masterpiece of intimidation. Polished obsidian floors reflected the thousands of crystal shards hanging from the ceiling, making the guests feel as though they were walking on a frozen lake that could shatter at any moment. Ji-hoon stood by his father, Chairman Choi. The older man was a shadow of a person, his skin like parchment stretched over a skull, yet his presence was suffocating. He held a glass of vintage scotch as if it were a scepter. The Nigerian girl is here, the chairman said, his voice a dry rasp. He didn't look at his son. She is wearing our colors. Bold. Ji-hoon followed his father's gaze. Naomi had entered, flanked by her father and 3 massive security guards. She wore a power hanbok, a deep midnight emerald green with a stiff high collar that made her look like a queen from a forgotten era. She didn't look ostracized. She looked like an invader. She's intelligent, father, Ji-hoon said, his heart hammering against his ribs. Her father's influence is growing. It would be wise to crush them. The chairman interrupted. He finally looked at Ji-hoon, his eyes 2 cold pits of cynicism. I saw the drone footage from the garden, Ji-hoon. Did you think I was blind? Or did you think your love made you invisible? The air in the ballroom seemed to thin. Ji-hoon realized the power shift had already happened. He wasn't the successor anymore. He was a liability being monitored. I was securing a deal, Ji-hoon stammered. You were handing her the keys to our vault, the chairman replied. He signaled to a waiter. Watch closely, son. This is how you handle a threat. The chairman walked toward Naomi's father, his hand outstretched in a gesture of false friendship. It was a false pique. The crowd parted, cameras flashing. To the world, it looked like a reconciliation of 2 titans. But as Ji-hoon watched Naomi's face, he saw the flicker of terror in her eyes. She knew. She knew the drive he had given her was a Trojan horse, and the chairman was about to play his hidden hand. The rain returned with a vengeance, turning the night into a blurred mess of neon and gray. Ji-hoon had managed to slip away from the gala, his ceremonial robes discarded for a simple black coat. He met Naomi in the private bamboo grove behind the estate, the only place where the wind was loud enough to drown out their voices. You didn't check the drive, did you? Ji-hoon asked, grabbing her shoulders. Naomi pushed him back, her eyes brimming with tears of rage. My father's house is being raided as we speak, Ji-hoon. The drive you gave me had a GPS beacon and a self-replicating worm. It didn't just give us the ledgers, it uploaded a terrorist financing algorithm into our private server. My father is being arrested. The weight of the betrayal hit Ji-hoon like a physical blow. His father hadn't just intercepted them. He had used Ji-hoon's desire to be a hero to deliver the final killing blow to Naomi's family. I didn't know, Ji-hoon whispered. I swear to you, Naomi. It doesn't matter what you knew, she screamed over the thunder. In your world, there is no room for not knowing. There is only the winner and the erased. As if on cue, the shadows between the bamboo stalks moved. 4 men in black suits emerged, their umbrellas held with military precision. They didn't have guns. They had something worse. Cameras and legal documents. Prince Ji-hoon, the lead guard said, the chairman requires your presence, and the young lady is to be escorted to the Immigration Processing Center. Ji-hoon stepped in front of her, but Naomi didn't hide. She stood tall, her ruined silk skirts clinging to her legs. She looked at Ji-hoon not with love, but with a profound disillusionment. The secret was out, and the punishment for their attachment was the total destruction of everything she had worked for. The chairman's study was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock that sounded like a falling axe. Ji-hoon stood on the Persian rug, his head bowed. On the desk lay Naomi's passport and a single one-way ticket to Lagos. She leaves at dawn, the chairman said. Her father will stay here to face the charges. Unless, of course, you prove your loyalty. What do you want? Ji-hoon asked. He felt hollowed out. as if his internal organs had been replaced with cold ash. Publicly announce your engagement to Senator Park's daughter. Sign the affidavit stating that Naomi intercepted you in the garden and attempted to blackmail you for the drive. If you do this, I will let her father go with a clerical error defense. He loses his business, but he keeps his life. This was the poisoned crown. To save the person he loved, Ji-hoon had to become the person who destroyed her. He had to participate in her erasure. She will hate me, Ji-hoon said. Better she hates a living man than loves a dead one, the chairman replied. He slid a fountain pen across the desk. The gold nib glinted like a tooth. Ji-hoon picked up the pen. With every stroke of his signature, he felt a piece of his identity die. He wasn't Ji-hoon anymore. He was a tool of the Choi Corporation. He had given up his heart to keep her breathing, but in doing so, he had ensured they could never exist in the same world again. Ji-hoon found her one last time on the rooftop of the shipping terminal. The city of Seoul spread out below them, a sea of lights that looked like a motherboard. The wind was cold, biting through his suit. I signed it, he said, not looking at her. Naomi was leaning against the railing. She looked smaller than she had in the garden. I know. The news is already scrolling on the tickers in the lobby. Prince Ji-hoon betrayed by migrant heiress. It's a good headline. Very traditional. I had to save your father, he said, his voice cracking. You saved his body, Ji-hoon. You killed his soul. You killed mine, too. She turned to face him, her ebony skin appearing almost gray in the harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal. You think this is a sacrifice? This is just cowardice dressed in a suit. You chose the throne, after all. I'm giving it up, he yelled, finally breaking. Once you're safe, I'm taking everything down with me. It's too late for that, she said, softly. She stepped toward him and, for the last time, placed her hand on his cheek. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a goodbye to a dead man. You're already erased, Ji-hoon. You just haven't realized that ghosts can't sit on thrones. She walked away toward the boarding gate, leaving him in the wind. The permanent loss wasn't the girl. It was the man he thought he could be. 2 weeks later. Ji-hoon was the golden son again, but he moved through the halls of his family estate like a zombie. He spent his nights in the basement archives, digging through files his father thought were deleted. He was looking for the debt. He found it in a folder marked 1998. It wasn't just corporate rivalry. Years ago, Naomi's father had been the chairman's partner. When the financial crisis hit, the chairman had sabotaged the safety protocols on one of Naomi's father's ships to collect the insurance money. That ship had been carrying Naomi's mother. The rivalry wasn't about ports. It was about a murder that had been polished over with 20 years of greed. Ji-hoon stared at the grainy photos of the wreckage. His entire life, his clothes, his education, his very food, had been paid for by the blood of the woman whose daughter he had just betrayed. The fragmentation of his mind was complete. He couldn't go back. He couldn't stay. He was the son of a killer, sitting in a palace built of bones. The engagement party for Ji-hoon and Senator Park's daughter was held at the Sheila Hotel. It was a sea of white lilies and high society vultures. The chairman was in high spirits, laughing with the politicians he had bought. Ji-hoon stood at the podium to give his toast. He looked out at the faces, the greed, the calculated smiles, the poisoned crown they all wore so proudly. "I have a gift for my father," Ji-hoon said into the microphone. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Instead of a tribute, the giant screens behind him flickered to life. He didn't show photos of his fiancée. He showed the 1998 insurance fraud documents. He showed the autopsy reports of the sailors. He showed the wire transfers. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. The chairman's face went from triumph to a sickly pale gray. "I'm not the heir to a company," Ji-hoon said, looking directly at his father. "I'm the witness to a crime." The security guards rushed the stage, but the hidden hand had already moved. Ji-hoon had live-streamed the entire thing to every major news outlet in Asia. He had used his inheritance to buy the one thing his father couldn't afford: the truth. The fallout was instantaneous. The Choi stocks plummeted. But the world's logic is cruel. The chairman wouldn't go down alone. He burned the evidence and, in the process, set the traditional family estate on fire. Ji-hoon ran through the burning corridors of his childhood home. The smell of cedarwood and silk burning was sickly sweet. He found his father in the library, sitting in his armchair as the curtains turned into sheets of flame. "You think you won?" The chairman laughed, the smoke making him cough. "You've destroyed the name. You've destroyed the wealth. You have nothing left. No girl, no throne, no father." "I have the truth," Ji-hoon said. "The truth is a cold bed, son." The ceiling groaned. A beam of ancient oak, heavy and burning, collapsed between them. Ji-hoon reached out, a final instinct of emotional attachment, but the fire roared, pushing him back. He had to leave him. He watched his father, the king of a burnt hill, vanish into the orange glow. Outside the burning estate, the rain was falling again, but it couldn't stop the fire. Ji-hoon stood on the lawn, his face blackened by soot. A car screeched to a halt. It wasn't the police. It was Naomi's brother, Samuel. He didn't come to thank Ji-hoon. He came with a baseball bat and eyes full of a decade's worth of repressed rage. "You think a confession makes up for 20 years? Samuel screamed, swinging. The first blow caught Ji-hoon in the ribs. He didn't fight back. He welcomed the pain. It was a substitution for the guilt. "Samuel, stop!" a voice cried out. Naomi was there. She had flown back, risking arrest. She pulled her brother away, but she didn't look at Ji-hoon with mercy. She looked at him with pity. That was the worst strike of all. "The police are coming, Ji-hoon," she said. "My father is free. But your family, you've left us all with nothing but ashes." The trial lasted 6 months. Ji-hoon sat in the defendant's chair, but he wasn't the one on trial. He was the star witness against his own legacy. He dismantled the Choi Empire brick by brick, document by document. He lost everything. His bank accounts were frozen. His name was stripped from the social register. He was the man who killed the Korean dream for a Nigerian nightmare, as the tabloids cruelly put it. He lived in a tiny one-room apartment in a part of Seoul he used to look down upon from his penthouse. He worked at a construction site, his soft, aristocratic hands turning rough and scarred. This was his ascension, not to a throne, but to the reality of the people his father had stepped on. But every night he checked his phone. No messages, no calls. The attachment was being punished by the silence. Naomi's family regained their wealth, but they moved to London. Korea had become a graveyard of memories for them. Ji-hoon received a letter. It wasn't from Naomi. It was from her father. "You did what was right, Ji-hoon. But right and happy are two different paths. My daughter is engaged to a man who has never seen a secret garden. She doesn't talk about you. She doesn't talk about Korea. You are a ghost to her. Leave her be." Ji-hoon sat on his floor, the letter in his hand. He had given up the throne. He had destroyed the monster. He had saved the girl. And the reward was a life of total, crushing solitude. The poisoned crown had been replaced by a crown of thorns. 5 years later, the ruins of the Choi estate had been turned into a public park. The bridge in the secret garden remained, though the stone was now chipped and covered in moss. Ji-hoon walked across it, a ghost among the tourists. He was 30 now, but he felt 100. He stopped in the middle of the bridge and looked at the water. The koi were gone, replaced by murky green algae. He felt a presence. He turned. Naomi was there. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black coat. She looked older, her face etched with the weariness of a woman who had built a world from the wreckage of another. She wasn't wearing a hanbok. She didn't look like a vision anymore. She looked like a person. "I heard you were here," she said. "I come here to remember who I killed," Ji-hoon said. "We all died on this bridge, Ji-hoon," she replied. She walked to the railing and looked at the water. "My father still hates yours. Your relatives still sue mine every other month. The war didn't end. It just changed shape. Do you ever think about if we hadn't met?" Naomi looked at him. For a second, the old fire was there, but it was quickly snuffed out by the cold logic of their lives. "If we hadn't met, I would still have a mother, and you would still have a soul. We were the poison, Ji-hoon, not the cure." She didn't hug him. She didn't stay. She walked away, her heels clicking on the stone, the sound of a closing door. Ji-hoon stood on the bridge as the sun set. The families were still fractured. The greed had won. The attachment had been punished until there was nothing left but two strangers sharing a memory of a fire. He had given up the throne, and in return, he was granted the most tragic inheritance of all, the right to be forgotten.